How many women entrepreneurs are out in the crowd today? Get a raise? Woo! Good, female founders. It's the next big thing. So many of you in the audience will be familiar with this question. What problem are you solving? That is the first question that all tech entrepreneurs have to answer. The simple answer to that for our company is that we're making money simple for millennials, particularly millennials of color. But the bigger problem that we're trying to solve is economic inequality in this country. Right now, we're facing a major sort of economic crisis in terms of the racial wealth gap. You see, I grew up in California. I was the daughter of farm workers who spent their early lives in fairly deep poverty. And not because they were immigrants, not because they didn't speak English, but because there was generational inequality. And so early on, I understood the importance of economic opportunity and the cost of being poor. And so I spent the first decade of my career in public policy, in government, attempting to solve this problem. The thing is that the solutions weren't moving fast enough, particularly when it comes to public policy. And as many of you know, politics is not the fastest turnaround. And so I started looking around and said, what can I do to help solve this problem? And so one of the things that I was looking at was, how do we affect people's lives? Because, and especially in the area of economic inequality, because when you are poor, when you're struggling, it affects every other piece of your life in terms of well-being. And so educational outcomes, health outcomes, incarceration. And so when you're in this space of survival, there's very little room for innovation. You have no place in your life to be thinking about the next big thing or starting a company or how to solve big social problems. Yet we need diversity in tech to find the solutions that are going to take us into the next century. And particularly, we need the solutions that are going to help to solve major social problems. Because as we face this sort of digital revolution and the great wealth that's being created, it's actually creating a much more sort of wealth gap. And so one of the things that I'm focused on is how do we move people from the survival, safety sort of needs first into more of a place where they can think about innovation and creativity. So there's 138 million adults that are struggling financially. And that's not just the underbanked. I think there's some confusion about sort of who is struggling and what that means. So when we're talking about building wealth, it's not just about a bank account. A bank account is obviously the first step in a long process to build wealth. But we're talking about, are you investing? Do you have a 401k? Are you prepared for retirement? Do you understand how to build wealth over time? And so one of the things that we're looking at in terms of fintech is, how do we do that? How do we solve that problem for people in a way that's simple and accessible and affordable? The great thing about what's happening right now in the digital revolution is that the barriers to entry have been lowered. When I first started this company, it was really a sort of at a whim, because I was like, I'm not a technologist, I don't code, I'm not in technology, I was a securities attorney, but I knew a lot about finance and I knew a lot about my community and what were the needs in the community. And so I put up a website on WordPress, and I taught myself enough about sort of technology to get through the first step. And that's really what they call product market fit. And so there's this opportunity to enter the market these days with simplicity, and figure out if you have a product that actually people will buy. And so we tested this idea, we put out our website, and we got people coming to the site. And we got a lot of enthusiasm. So I said, okay, there's something here, so what can I do? And I started looking around for mentors and people in this space that I could look to. The problem was that this is still a very exclusive space, particularly in fintech. And I said, how is it that we're trying to solve major problems, so particularly around the bottom of the pyramid, and when you think about it, that's actually where the economic opportunity lies for institutions, financial institutions, and for people that want to sort of create economic sort of stability in this area. And so I said, we really need to figure out how we bring more entrepreneurs into the fintech space to solve these problems. So fintech, I'm sure most of you are in this room because you're interested in financial technology. So I'm assuming we're on the same page around what fintech means. But just to clarify, it's basically using technology to address any kinds of financial transactions. So whether that's payments or banking or savings or credit, you are seeing a revolution right now in the world of fintech. And there's sort of two ways that I think about what's happening in fintech. There's sort of disruption, and then there's transformation. So I want to talk a little bit first about disruption. And this is really about automating what used to be sort of labor-intensive functions, trading, personal financial advice and management. Things that used to be a very intensive one-on-one relationship are now being automated. And that's a good thing because it allows us now to take those resources and to make it more scalable and reachable to more people. So things like money transfers, for example, are seeing a huge revolution in terms of access, and the cost is being lowered. As many people know, remittance is a billion-dollar industry, but the brunt of that cost actually falls on low-income wage earners who are sending money back to their countries. So there's a really interesting space to be able to use this technology to lower that cost. We also have things like crowdfunding and capital formation. How many are you aware that there's new rules under the SEC that are now allow non-accredited investors to invest in private companies? For a few of you, this is a really big deal. Equity crowdfunding under Title III will now provide an opportunity for each one of us to invest in a private company. This used to be the exclusive domain of qualified investors, and basically that's maybe up to 5% of the population that was able to meet that qualification. And what this means for entrepreneurs like me and you and people that are really sort of new to the space is that we can go directly to our users and say, hey, do you believe in me? Do you believe in my company? Do you want to invest in my company? And so you're allowed now through a crowdfunding platform to be able to invest a certain amount of your income into a private company. Why is this important? Because when you look at how wealth is sort of created in this country, one of the ways that it's created is through business and investment. So when you have had rules that say, well, only a certain amount of people are allowed to invest, that means only a certain amount of those people are also going to get the windfall of that investment, a successful investment. So if you were investing in Twitter early on, most of you wouldn't be sitting here today, right? So this is the kind of opportunities that are going to be expanded through equity crowdfunding. And so that's another way that technology has started to disrupt the financial tech services space. So the other piece I want to talk about is transformation. And that's a little bit different. And transformation is really about blockchain and Bitcoin. More importantly, blockchain. So blockchain is sort of the underlying technology for Bitcoin. How many are familiar with Bitcoin in this room? Oh, look at that, tech savvy. How many of you own Bitcoin? Good for you. Yeah, we'll see how the return on investment, but it's an interesting space. But more importantly, blockchain is allowing this sort of middleman to be taken out of a lot of these formal transactions. And I think that there's super possibilities and opportunities involved in blockchain, but we need more diverse technologists in this space. We just recently did a hackathon, and we came in second place at the Barclays Hackathon for blockchain for a company that I'm working on the side called Persona ID. And the idea is this, is that we would be able to use blockchain to more effectively and efficiently distribute public welfare benefits to people. Anyone that understands having sat in a welfare line or to get food stamps understands it's very time intensive, super paper intensive, very confusing, it's a lot of burden. Blockchain could alleviate a lot of those problems, and also in terms of fraud detection and auditing. So you have people using smart contracts also, where you're talking about farmers in Africa are allowed to sell their products through the blockchain and making it cost effective for them to do that. So what I would say that I would encourage everyone here to look into blockchain, figure out how you can incorporate some of the innovation and technology that's happening in that space into the ideas and into the projects that you're working on. I just wanted to take a look at the unbundling of the bank. This is what disruption looks like. These are all of the different companies, well, this is just one slide. These are many of the companies that are disrupting financial services, particularly the bank. It just means that we are going to bank completely different over the next 10 years. It's already happening. There are many solutions out there, and this is going to allow us to bring in more people into the financial services sector. It will expand opportunities for those that are sort of not banked, but also not building wealth. And so one of the things that I want to share here is that most of these companies are run by white males. And the problem with that is that the solutions that we're trying or the problems that we're trying to solve, that's not the demographic. So we need more diversity in this sector. It's very important that we start building for the demographic change that is happening in this country. If we want financial inclusion, if we want to figure out how we're going to maintain a healthy and innovative economy, we need to make sure that everyone is involved in this. Some of the things that are happening in this space are very interesting, and some of them are just arbitrage opportunities, meaning that they're competing against each other to see who's going to get bought out. But there's a couple of these companies that I think that will come to the foreground and will be really the place where we can see the most sort of impact in terms of the technology and services. So for example, I'm going to plug BBVA, not because I actually use Simple. It's a new mobile banking technology that I actually promote in my blogs a lot. But there's things like Betterment, which allows for you to open up a 401k very simply. There's Wealthfront. There's many that are actually really going to change the landscape of how we do business in the financial sector. I talked a little bit about blockchain and the ledger, the distributed ledger, but I would say that this is actually one of the most important places that we can look at global transformation in terms of financial inclusion and financial impact. One of the things that I think is really important to walk away from is to understand, depending on where you're at, if you're an entrepreneur, if you're an investor, if you're a financial bank, we need to start connecting more of the dots in the financial world, in the tech world, because it's not just sort of a siloed opportunity. We have opportunities to work with nonprofits that are serving the underbanked. We have opportunities to be working with governments to transform many of the benefits that are given to those that are receiving welfare benefits. There's many opportunity across this sort of financial services sector for us to work together. I would also say that it's very important as investors to think about the landscape in terms of who you're investing in this next opportunity with fintech. Fintech is still one of the growing opportunities in tech. As we've all heard, there's sort of a bubble coming, but fintech has still got a lot of opportunities for disruption. And so when you're looking at opportunities for investment, I think it's very important that we look at who's in the room and what problems we're solving and for whom and who's leading those efforts. So in conclusion, I'd like to say that there is tons of opportunity for young people, for diverse founders, for investors to really solve this very important problem of financial inclusion and economic opportunity. I think if we do this right, we can actually move the needle on the racial wealth gap, on economic inclusion, and I encourage all of you to talk with me afterwards about what we're doing in terms of partnerships and to look for those connections in terms of the work that we're all doing. Thank you so much.